What if I told you that while the pyramids of Egypt were still centuries away from being built, a sophisticated civilization was already thriving in what is now Nigeria? A civilization so advanced that they were creating intricate terracotta sculptures, developing complex social structures, and mastering metallurgy while much of the world was still in the Stone Age. In the heart of West Africa lies a secret that archaeologists kept hidden from the mainstream narrative for decades. The Nok culture, a civilization that emerged around 1500 BCE and flourished until 500 CE, predates the rise of ancient Egypt's New Kingdom and rivals the artistic sophistication of classical Greece. But here's what makes this even more extraordinary. The Nok people weren't just creating art, they were pioneering iron smelting technology at a time when most of Africa and Europe were still working with bronze. They built settlements that hint at complex governance, trade networks, and spiritual practices that influenced civilizations for thousands of years to come. Today, we're diving deep into the mysteries of the Nok civilization, uncovering the truth about Africa's oldest known sculptural tradition, exploring why this groundbreaking culture remained obscured from history books, and discovering how their legacy shaped the mighty kingdoms that followed. This is the story of Nigeria's ancient giants, the civilization that time forgot. To understand just how ancient the Nok civilization truly is, we need to put their timeline into perspective. When the Nok people were establishing their first settlements around 1500 BCE, Egypt was between its Middle and New Kingdoms. The famous boy pharaoh Tutankhamun wouldn't be born for another 1,200 years. Rome wouldn't be founded for nearly 800 years. And the Parthenon in Athens, still more than a millennium away. The Nok culture emerged in the Jos Plateau region of central Nigeria, in what is now Kaduna State. This area, rich in iron ore and blessed with fertile land, became the cradle of one of Africa's most enigmatic civilizations. But here's where it gets fascinating. The Nok didn't slowly evolve from a primitive society. Archaeological evidence suggests they appeared relatively suddenly, with already advanced skills in sculpture, metallurgy, and agriculture. It's as if they inherited knowledge from an even earlier yet undiscovered culture, or developed at a pace that defies our understanding of technological progression. The name Nok itself comes from a small village where the first terracotta head was discovered in 1928 by miners digging for tin. A worker's shovel struck something hard, not ore, but an exquisitely crafted human head with elaborate features that would challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient African civilizations. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community, but it would take decades before the full significance of the Nok culture would be recognized. Why? Because the narrative of African history had been written without them, and rewriting history is never easy. One of the most stunning revelations about the Nok civilization is their mastery of iron technology. While much of the ancient world was still in the Bronze Age, the Nok were smelting iron as early as 1000 BCE, possibly even earlier. Think about what this means. The Nok weren't just ahead of their African neighbors, they were ahead of most of the world. Iron smelting requires temperatures exceeding 1200 degrees Celsius. Achieving this demanded sophisticated furnace designs, precise temperature control, and deep metallurgical knowledge. Archaeologists have uncovered numerous iron smelting sites across Nok territory, complete with the remains of furnaces, slag heaps, and iron tools. These weren't crude attempts at metalworking. These were efficient, well-designed operations that produced high-quality iron for tools, weapons, and agricultural implements. But here's the mystery that keeps researchers awake at night. There's no evidence of a Bronze Age in Nok culture. They appear to have jumped directly from stone tools to iron technology. This is extraordinarily rare in human history. Most civilizations progressed through a bronze phase before mastering iron, but the Nok either skipped this step entirely or learned ironworking from an outside source that remains undiscovered. This iron revolution transformed Nok society. With superior tools, they could clear forests more efficiently, cultivate larger farms, and create surplus food that allowed their population to grow. Iron weapons gave them defensive capabilities and possibly expanded their influence over neighboring regions. The control of iron became the foundation of their power, and perhaps the reason their culture dominated for over 1,000 years. If the Nok were only master metallurgists, they would still deserve a prominent place in history. But what truly sets them apart, what makes them unforgettable, is their art. The Nok terracotta sculptures are among the most sophisticated artistic achievements of the ancient world. These aren't simple clay figures, they're masterpieces of anatomical understanding, emotional expression, and technical skill that rival anything produced in ancient Greece or Rome. The sculptures range from a few centimeters to nearly life-size figures over a meter tall. They depict humans with elaborate hairstyles, intricate jewelry, and distinctive facial features. Some scholars believe these features suggest different social classes or ethnic groups within Nok society. The attention to detail is breathtaking. Individual braids carved into hairstyles, beaded necklaces rendered with precision, and facial expressions that convey dignity, authority, and profound humanity. But here's what makes these sculptures truly mysterious: the eyes. Nok figures have a distinctive style, triangular, pierced eyes that seem to stare into your soul. Some are depicted with dilated pupils, suggesting spiritual trance states or connections to the divine. Were these sculptures portraits of real people, representations of gods and ancestors, or something else entirely? The artistic style is so unique that nothing like it appears before the Nok, and nothing quite like it appears after. It's as if they developed this sophisticated artistic tradition in isolation, perfected it over centuries, and then it vanished when their civilization declined. What's even more remarkable is the technical process. Creating terracotta sculptures of this size without them cracking during firing requires expert knowledge of clay composition, drying techniques, and kiln temperature control. The Nok achieved this consistency across centuries, suggesting formalized training and the transmission of specialized knowledge through generations. These weren't just decorative objects. Many archaeologists believe they played crucial roles in religious ceremonies, ancestor worship, and social rituals that defined Nok identity. Who were the Nok people? How did they organize their society? And what kind of culture produced such extraordinary art and technology? These questions have puzzled archaeologists for decades because the Nok left no written records. Everything we know must be pieced together from archaeological evidence, and the picture that emerges is fascinating. The Nok weren't a unified empire with a single ruler. Instead, evidence suggests a network of interconnected settlements, each possibly governed by local leaders or councils. The distribution of terracotta sculptures and ironworking sites indicates a shared cultural identity that spanned hundreds of kilometers, from the Jos Plateau to the Niger and Benue river valleys. The presence of elaborate sculptures suggests a stratified society with specialized artisans. Not everyone in Nok culture was making terracotta heads or smelting iron. These required years of training and dedicated practice. This means the society produced enough surplus food to support non-farming specialists, a hallmark of complex civilizations. Trade networks were extensive. Archaeological digs have uncovered materials not native to the region, suggesting the Nok traded with distant neighbors. They likely exchanged iron goods, pottery, and possibly agricultural products for items like salt, stones for jewelry, and perhaps knowledge. Religious and spiritual life appears to have been central to Nok culture. The elaborate nature of many sculptures, their possible use in burial sites, and the recurring themes in their art suggest sophisticated belief systems. Some researchers theorize that the Nok practiced ancestor worship, with the terracotta heads representing deceased leaders or family members who continued to watch over the living. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Nok society is what we don't know. We don't know their language. We don't know their myths and stories. We don't know the names of their leaders or the songs they sang. Yet their legacy whispers to us through the clay, telling us that here, in ancient Nigeria, was a people of remarkable creativity and resilience. For over 1,000 years, the Nok civilization flourished, and then around 500 CE, something changed. The archaeological record becomes sparse. New sculptures stop appearing. The great iron-working centers fall silent. What happened to the Nok? This is one of the greatest mysteries in African archaeology, and the truth is, we don't know for certain. But we have theories, each more intriguing than the last. Climate change may have played a role. Environmental evidence suggests that around the time of the Nok decline, the region experienced significant shifts in rainfall patterns. Droughts could have devastated agriculture, forcing populations to migrate or collapse. Without the food surplus that supported their specialized artisans, the cultural practices that defined the Nok may have been abandoned. Others point to the rise of new powers. By 500 CE, new kingdoms and cultures were emerging across West Africa. The Nok may not have disappeared, they may have been absorbed, their people integrating into these new societies, their traditions evolving into something different. There's also the possibility of disease, conflict, or internal social upheaval, factors that have toppled civilizations throughout history. But here's what's truly fascinating. The Nok didn't entirely disappear. Many scholars believe their cultural DNA persisted, influencing the great West African kingdoms that would rise centuries later. The Yoruba, Igbo, and other Nigerian cultures may carry echoes of Nok traditions in their art, social structures, and spiritual practices. The terracotta tradition continued in West Africa, evolving into the famous Ife and Benin bronze works that would astonish European visitors centuries later. When Portuguese explorers first saw the bronze sculptures of Benin in the 15th century, they couldn't believe Africans had created them, but the artistic lineage can be traced back to the Nok, the ancient masters who started it all. For over 1,000 years after their decline, the Nok civilization was forgotten. Their sculptures lay buried, their furnaces crumbled to dust, their story erased from human memory. Then came that fateful day in 1928 when a tin miner's shovel struck that first terracotta head near the village of Nok. But even then, the significance wasn't immediately recognized. It would take decades of archaeological work, led largely by British archaeologist Bernard Fagg in the 1940s and 50s, to begin piecing together the story of this lost civilization. As more sculptures were discovered and carbon dating technology improved, the age and sophistication of the Nok became undeniable. Here was proof of advanced African civilization that predated the medieval West African kingdoms like Mali and Songhai by over 1,000 years. Yet, despite these groundbreaking discoveries, the Nok remain relatively unknown outside academic circles. Why aren't they as famous as ancient Egypt or the Aztecs? Part of the answer lies in the historical narrative that has long downplayed African achievements. For centuries, the idea that sub-Saharan Africa had ancient, sophisticated civilizations was dismissed or ignored by Western scholars. But the tide is turning. Today, Nigerian archaeologists and international researchers are working to uncover more about the Nok. Modern technology, including ground-penetrating radar, advanced dating techniques, and chemical analysis, is revealing new secrets about this ancient culture. Museums in Nigeria and around the world are finally giving the Nok the recognition they deserve. Their sculptures are considered among the most valuable artifacts of African heritage, with individual pieces worth millions. More importantly, the Nok are reclaiming their place in the story of human civilization. They remind us that advanced cultures flourished across Africa long before European contact, that the history of innovation and creativity is truly global, and that there are still countless stories waiting to be unearthed from the soil of the ancient world. The story of the Nok doesn't end with their decline. In fact, in many ways, it was just the beginning. The cultural and technological innovations pioneered by the Nok reverberated across West Africa for millennia. Their mastery of ironworking spread, enabling agricultural expansion and the rise of new kingdoms. Their artistic traditions evolved, influencing the sculptural styles of later cultures throughout the region. Consider the famous Ife bronzes, those stunning metal sculptures created by the Yoruba people between the 12th and 15th centuries CE. While separated from the Nok by nearly 1,000 years, the artistic sophistication and cultural significance show remarkable continuity. Both cultures valued naturalistic representation. Both created sculptures for religious and commemorative purposes, and both achieved technical mastery that amazed the world. Then there's the mighty Benin Kingdom, whose bronze plaques and sculptures are now recognized as masterpieces of world art. When British colonial forces looted the Benin Palace in 1897, stealing thousands of artifacts, Europeans were shocked by their quality. Some initially refused to believe Africans could have created them, but we now understand that these works were part of an unbroken artistic tradition stretching back to the Nok, Africa's first master sculptors. Even today, contemporary Nigerian artists draw inspiration from Nok aesthetics. The distinctive style of those ancient terracottas, the triangular eyes, the elaborate hairstyles, the dignified expressions, echoes through modern African art, connecting today's creators with ancestors who worked in clay 3,000 years ago. But perhaps the most important legacy of the Nok is what they represent. Proof that Africa's history is deeper, richer, and more complex than the simplified narratives often presented. They challenge us to look beyond the familiar stories and discover the countless civilizations that shaped our world but haven't yet claimed their rightful place in our collective memory. The Nok remind us that history isn't written only by those who left texts and monuments of stone. Sometimes the most profound stories are told in clay, waiting patiently in the earth for someone to listen. So, what have we learned about the Nok civilization, this ancient Nigerian culture that predates the pyramids and pioneered innovations that changed West Africa forever? We've discovered that advanced civilizations weren't confined to the Mediterranean or the Middle East. While the world celebrated Egypt and Greece, the Nok were quietly creating masterpieces in terracotta, revolutionizing metallurgy with early iron smelting, and building a society sophisticated enough to support specialized artisans and complex trade networks. We've learned that the history we've been taught is incomplete, that countless stories remain buried, waiting for archaeologists' brushes to reveal them. The Nok spent over 1,000 years in the earth, forgotten, until chance brought them back to light. How many other civilizations are still waiting to tell their stories? We've seen how cultural legacies persist across millennia, how the innovations of one civilization become the foundation for those that follow. The Nok may have faded, but their spirit lived on in the great kingdoms of Ife and Benin and continues today in the art and culture of modern Nigeria. Most importantly, the Nok civilization challenges us to expand our understanding of human achievement. When we talk about ancient civilizations, we must include not just Egypt and Rome, but Nok, Kerma, Axum, and countless others that prove innovation and creativity have always been global endeavors. The terracotta heads of the Nok, with their piercing triangular eyes, still gaze at us across 3,000 years, asking us to remember them, to honor their achievements, and to recognize that Africa's history is humanity's history. If you found this journey into ancient Nigeria fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more hidden stories from world history. And I want to hear from you. What other forgotten civilizations should we explore? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. Remember, every archaeological discovery is just another chapter in the endless story of human civilization. And sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones we haven't heard yet. Until next time, keep exploring the mysteries of our ancient world.